All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Right now, as we are recording this podcast, we are watching the third vote for the Speaker of the House live. And hopefully Jim Jordan will get it this time. If not, we'll have to keep going. There's no one else, quite frankly, at this point that I see that can get it. Patrick McHenry, that was tossed out. Pretty much, you had Elise Stefanik and other leaders saying, listen, we don't want that, this temporary House Speaker up until January. Others kind of rebelled against that relatively quickly, and quite frankly, I'm glad that they did. Jim Jordan still has the most votes, or he has been the most vote getters. There's been a few Republicans that have been rebellious because they don't like the tactics behind the scenes and so on, etc. But it is time for them to move forward. We've got major fights on major battles to fight. So we'll continue to watch this and we'll update you the best we can as this podcast goes on. If this vote isn't finished by the time we're done with the podcast, I will be on the Officer Tatum show tonight, so you'll get to hear me there. And obviously, we will know whether or not Jim Jordan is the speaker, the new Speaker of the House, relatively shortly. Anyway, all right, so a lot to get to. I do want to talk about this issue with free speech. I want to comment on Joe Biden's speech last night. I'll be frank with you, I didn't watch the speech in its entirety. I watched part of the speech, captured some of the speech, listened to a little bit of commentary, but RNC had a good take on it. RNC Research Online, they had a good take on it, and I think this is what's important. And I'll give you, based upon what I read, I'll give you my analysis based on the things that I've read and the quotes that Joe Biden made during the speech. I did read parts of the speech, so I did do that. But I just don't take Joe Biden seriously, and frankly, I don't think the world takes him seriously, and I think that's why we see the chaos that we do see. So here's what Joe Biden failed to mention in his speech last night, when basically what he did was it was a speech that was supposed to address the Israel-Hamas war, but most of the speech was actually catered towards Ukraine, and that's because I found out later that the speech had already been written and about Ukraine. What Joe Biden wants to do, and the Democrat Party wants to do, is they want to tie, actually, and many Republicans as well, they want to tie the Israeli aid to Ukraine aid. Now, Israel already gets about $3.8 or $4 billion each year from us. Now, Israel said they're willing to buy munitions from us. Let them buy whatever they want. I have no problem with that. And for those of you that think Russia and Ukraine or the Russia, Ukraine, and Israel Hamas war are the same thing, they're simply not. We've got 32 Americans that were murdered in Israel. You guys know the debacle that occurred the other day, or yesterday, I believe, when the White House took pictures of special forces, which is unheard of. You don't want their identity seen because, God forbid, terrorists will spot them out while they're there in the area, but also find out who their families are and try to kill them here. I mean, that was absolutely insane. I'm still watching this vote live. This is the third vote for Jordan. According to Jordan, does not have the votes. Fourth speaker vote possible. I'm not sure how that is, given right now I'm watching 87 to 85. Honestly, keep going. The Republicans don't have anyone else. Kevin McCarthy is out of the running. I don't know why people continue to vote for him. He's backed Jordan. Steve Scalise is out of the running. You got people still voting for him. He's backed Jordan, although behind the scenes, if you listened to my podcast the other day with Lisa Elizabeth, behind the scenes, Steve Scalise, he's not fond of Jordan. And frankly, a lot of the Republicans, they're scared to have a backbone. They're scared to defend their positions. And I get they're not in quote unquote safe districts, but honestly, the money will flow from the RNC if they put up a fight and they learn to make cohesive and coherent arguments. I think a lot of this stuff is straight up minutia, straight up BS. I think Republicans can win in purple states. How is it that Democrats can go to so-called purple states they can go to purple districts and win when they're radical lefties like Rashida Tlaib? It's absolutely insane. But anyway, we'll see what happens. We continue to follow this. We're watching C-SPAN live here. For those of you that are subscribers to the podcast, you go to my YouTube page, Rumble. You can watch this live. The votes are taking place live. And frankly, for those of you that are listening to my podcast, if Jim Jordan doesn't get it this time, there's a few holdouts. We need to keep calling. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121 is the number to call your congressman. You'll have to search online and find the number. You'll have to search online and find the number for the local office, because they're recommending that you call both. I'm going to be calling Vern Buchanan. He's a Republican Florida congressman that held out. All right, and so we're still watching live. The numbers are growing. I don't know why they're saying he doesn't have the votes. As in, he didn't have the votes the second go round, and he might have them this time, or they are predicting that he doesn't have them this time based upon what he knows. Okay, so anyway, let me just go through this real quickly. So Biden mentioned, tried to link Ukraine, the importance of the Russia-Ukraine war, because we've got a dictator there that is that's literally trying to take over land, and then and trying to wipe out a nation state, a sovereign state in Ukraine, and he's trying to compare it to Israel and Hamas. Israel, who was attacked, 1,400 Israelis and others, frankly, that were murdered by Hamas, the terrorist group Hamas that actually runs Gaza. You've got 200 hostages, over 200 hostages. Again, 32 Americans murdered. I'm not sure how many Americans are being held hostage. I've heard different numbers. In the last day or so, I think I've heard upwards of 20, and then numbers as low as 12 or 13. I'm just not exactly sure. I'll have to double check with those numbers. But here's what he failed to mention, and this is why I don't take this guy seriously. So still in both places, and by the way, I support Israel. I stand with Israel. I believe their fight is our fight, because I believe that the terrorists that they don't kill there, I do believe they will come here. And as a matter of fact, I do believe that they are here. But Israel has said that they are willing to buy munitions. We should sell them whatever they want. That's the way I feel. We should sell them whatever they want. We shouldn't sell our enemies whatever they want. But we should sell our biggest ally in the Middle East, Israel, whatever they want and whatever they need to totally eradicate Hamas. It's really as simple as that. And then we can stand with them also verbally. And, from the podium, at least Biden has done better than on that than I thought he would, frankly. So we can stand with them on that front. And as well, we should. All right. So that's what we can do. But here's what he failed to mention. Hat tip RNC research. He didn't mention the southern border. Guys, special interest aliens. We had over 70,000 special interest aliens. You know what those are? Special interest aliens are illegal aliens that have come from hot zones where terrorist attacks have occurred, or terrorism percolates, all right, or hot zones, basically, wherever there's been some type of terrorism issue. Some of those hot zones. So we have over 70,000 special interest aliens that we know have crossed the border. Those are the ones that we know of. He didn't mention China at all. Did you guys know that China today, I saw this in the news, but China is sitting there asking for a ceasefire. They want to be the broker. You have the China-Russia-Iran alliance at this point. They want to be the broker. It would benefit China. Why? Iran is selling oil to China. Of course they want to see a ceasefire. They don't want to see Iran proxies fall. All right? China wants to be the big dog on the world stage. Don't sit here and think that if America falls, everyone's going to be equal. That is so childlike. That's just insane. I'm sorry. That's insane. That's so infantile. That's just not the case. There are people that want to be the big dog. China wants to be the big dog. So no mention of China in the speech. Those are our biggest threats. Oh, and by the way, I should have had the, Gabe, can you pull that Sarah Huckabee Sanders video I sent you the other day so that people can hear it here on the podcast, where, if you let me know if you still have it. Maybe I still have it. I'm sorry to bring this up at the last minute, but let me just read this as we're talking about the China, or as I mentioned, the China threat. So I mentioned this yesterday on Officer Tatum's show. The Pentagon officials warned at hat tip to Daily Wire, an inadvertent conflict with China could erupt after releasing declassified pictures and videos on Tuesday showing Chinese aircraft displaying, quote, highly concerning behavior toward U.S. military planes in international airspace. Dr. Eli Ratner, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, told reporters on Tuesday that more than 180 incidents have occurred over the East and South China Sea region since 2021, signifying a sharp increase in coercive and risky operational behavior in the last decade. Did I send you a video of that by chance? To Gabe, that fighter jet, that Chinese fighter jet. All right. So that's nearly 200 cases where People's Liberation Army operators have performed reckless maneuvers or discharged chaff or shot off flares or approached too rapidly or too close to U.S. aircraft, all as part of trying to interfere with the ability of U.S. forces to operate safely in places where we and every country in the world have every right to be under international law. I wish I had sent Gabe the video of this, because you could see there was a U.S. warplane flying in the region, and then you're talking about a Chinese fighter jet comes dangerously close to the U.S. warplane. So no talk of China last night in Joe Biden's speech. These are the real threats, right? Southern border, China, obviously Islamic Jihad is a threat because they consider Israel the little Satan, and they consider America the big Satan. So whatever you see them do to Israel, just know Islamic jihadists want to do that to the United States of America. No, he didn't mention Taiwan, whose risk of Chinese invasion grows as Biden does nothing absolutely to deter it. And quite frankly, if China wants Taiwan, Taiwan is there for the taking. What is Biden going to do? There's things that he can do, but he's weak, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. He did little to demand the release of American hostages by Hamas terrorists. So Biden, as you guys know, the guy literally is willing to give Hamas, he says for humanitarian aid, $100 million. Guys, to Gaza. Who's running Gaza? Hamas is. That is one of the dumbest things, excuse me, I've ever heard. You're giving money to terrorists while you're sitting on national television talking about how we need to stop terrorism. You're investing in the slaughter of more Jews by giving $100 million to Hamas. It makes no sense. He didn't chastise the members of his own party. You had Representative Rashida Tlaib. By the way, I believe there should be a focused effort by the RNC to get that lady out of office. And I mean by elections. I had some guy on Twitter, oh, Carl said this about free speech when it comes to Trump. He was totally right. But then he turns right around and says that we need to kick Rashida Tlaib out of office. He didn't mention her name, but I did. I tweeted back. Yes, I did say that. Through elections. Yeah. People just don't think out there. It's weird. Excuse me, but that's where we are. So he didn't chastise his own members. You had Ilhan Omar. She walked it back, but she blamed both Rashida Tlaib after Rashida Tlaib knew the truth. She knew the truth about that hospital, quote unquote, bombing, which, by the way, the numbers are down. And now they're saying that bombing that was actually perpetrated by Hamas with a misfire, one of their own rockets. Initially, the reports were about 500 people were killed. Those numbers have dropped down tenfold. Now they're saying about 50 people were killed. And I'm not saying that it's not tragic, but just know that Hamas did it, because 30 to 40% of their rockets are not effective, simply because they're building them out of toilet pipes, for God's sakes. They're plumbing pipes. They really are. I mean, that's the simple truth. That's the simple truth of the matter. All right. So anyway, there's that. Another thing that Biden failed to mention in his speech is that U.S. forces near Baghdad were attacked while he spoke, and that underscores the danger of his weakness. So you had U.S. forces that were attacked in Iraq, literally right before the guy speaks. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I'm going to talk about free speech a little bit and the Sidney Powell case. let me just bring this up. I want to bring up Sidney Powell. I want to bring up the Trump gag order, because free speech is crucial and free speech is very important. Okay, so Sidney Powell yesterday, this was big news. A caller called into the program when I was sitting in for the Officer Tatum, and he's asked why hadn't I talked about Sidney Powell. Frankly, I got to be honest with you. All of this stuff drives me nuts, because I know all of this stuff is bogus. I know exactly what the left is doing. They want the narrative that not only is Trump corrupt, but everybody around Trump is corrupt. So let me just bring you an update. And I heard a wonderful X space yesterday by actually 2 federal attorneys, criminal defense, and they specialize in other areas. One lady was just retired in the last year. I mean, but point by point, they were absolutely fabulous breaking down this stuff. I was listening to the experts, if you will, as I was on my drive home. So it was neat to see that Twitter space that was up. I forget the name of the attorney, quite frankly, but I'm going to have to try to get her on. But this is from the Washington Examiner. Sidney Powell pleads guilty to criminal charges in Fulton County in the RICO case. So Sidney Powell again pleaded guilty to criminal charges as part of her deal with Fulton County prosecutors in Georgia in the 2020 election subversion case. So her guilty plea came yesterday during a live stream court hearing, and this is just days before the criminal trial was slated for October 23rd. With her co-defendant Kenneth Chesebro, prosecutors agreed to diminish her 7 felony counts, according to the Washington Examiner, to 6 misdemeanor counts of conspiracy to commit intentional interference with performance of election duties. Now, guys, I got to tell you, and I've said this plenty of times before, and I wish I had grabbed my notes, there's literally been 150 election deniers when it comes to the Democrat Party, but we don't hear anything of the sort when it comes to that. But the goal of the left is to try to make the right look corrupt, to try to make the right, it's to project what the left is doing onto Republicans. And quite frankly, the reason why I believe Sidney Powell, in my opinion, copped a plea was as simple as this. It's process. It's process. Even though, as these attorneys explained last night, another reason why she was able to plead down too is you can have these RICO charges and all these felony counts, and everything sounds so big and bad and horrible on the news, but and then you get a good attorney, right? You get a good defense attorney in the courtroom, and then all of a sudden things start changing. And then when the defense attorney gets their hands on the evidence, and the defense attorney gets to cross-examine witnesses for the prosecution and so on, etc., and even Fani Willis, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we overstepped our bounds. And so this was the sense that those attorneys were getting, is that Fani Willis obviously overcharged. She is in over her head, and now these witnesses are going to be able to plead down. However, the narrative, which is what the left wanted, remains. But Sidney Powell will essentially, she's already pled guilty to this, so she will not be able to, what's the word that I'm looking for? She will not be able to appeal that because she pled guilty. So she won't be able to appeal it on a later date. But what the attorneys explained that I did not know, with her charges being dropped and her getting 6 years, 6 misdemeanor counts, and I believe it's 6 years of probation. At the end of those 6 years, as long as she follows all of the directives from the court, those charges are just gone. Like, they're wiped away, as if it will show on her record that she was charged, but there was never a conviction. Never a conviction. So this is the benefit that she'll get long-term legally. And it doesn't look like she'll lose her law license as a result, although there will be no doubt that many people will go after her to try to make her lose her law license. But at this point in time, she won't be losing her law license. And all of this stuff will be gone at the end of her probation, as if she were never charged. So that's the benefit to that. Let's see here. It says here, Daisha Young, a Fulton County prosecutor, asked Powell how she pleaded to the 6 counts. A Superior Court Judge, Scott McAfee, accepted the plea and said She could not withdraw it. She was sentenced to 6 years probation, a $6,000 fine, $2,700 restitution. Powell will also be required to testify truthfully at future trials and write an apology letter to the people of the Peach State. And again, this is what the left is going to want for propaganda: the apology letter. But also, here's a line that a lot of people are getting hung up on, and it's neither. Okay, I'll put it, Powell will also be required to testify, quote unquote, truthfully at future trial. So a lot of people are saying, oh man, she flipped on Donald Trump. Possibly, but she could also be dangerous to the left. It doesn't mean, quite frankly, that she flipped on Donald Trump. It doesn't mean that at all. Now she's pled guilty. Now she's accepted the charges. She can speak freely. She can just say, no, that's true. That isn't true. Yes, that is true. So frankly, it could hurt Trump, sure, but it could also hurt the prosecution because she's free to speak freely. She's the second person, again, in this case, to plead guilty to the charges. There's still 17 others. You had bail bondsman Scott Hall, who pleaded guilty on September 9 to 5 counts and was accused of willfully collaborating with multiple co-defendants, including Powell. Attorneys for Powell had strongly denied prosecutors' claims, according to the Examiner, that she helped formulate the Coffee County breach. They said at pretrial hearings that prosecutors are, quote unquote, incorrect, and that, quote, the evidence will show that she was not the driving force behind, quote unquote, the incident. And you guys may remember that Sidney Powell would say she was going to release the Kraken at the end of 2020, but apparently there was nothing there. But you know, she didn't take Joe Biden to court, or take it to the Supreme Court, 3 times like Al Gore did. Yet he's not in jail. This is why this stuff is just so fake and frustrating to me. So before participating in several failed challenges, it says Powell was writing off her success in the June 29, 2019 for her former client Michael Flynn. You guys may remember how the FBI entrapped Michael Flynn at the beginning of Trump's presidency. It also says some of Trump's closest allies, including his former personal attorney Rudy Giuliani, another defendant in the Georgia case, began to distance themselves from Powell. So that's the history. She was initially charged with 7 counts by attorney Fani Willis. This included a violation of the state's Racketeering Act, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit election fraud, and 4 other conspiracy counts, including to defraud the state. The fact that those are massive charges. She would have spent a lot of time. The fact that they were able to drop all those charges down and plead to a misdemeanor tells you that Fani Willis's case is weak. All right. It just tells you that Fani Willis's case is extremely, extremely weak. Sidney Powell didn't flip, one guy said. After the guilty plea, an attorney who previously worked with Powell on the Flynn case, Molly McCann Sanders, released a sympathetic statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, underscoring that Powell's plea doesn't mean she flipped on any other defendants in the case. And flipped is in quotes. Here's what Molly McCann Sanders had to say. Sidney Powell is absolutely innocent. The fact that Fani Willis dropped all 7 felonies tells the tale. She had no case. This is true. She absolutely had no case. But she did have the coercive power of the state. And that's what Sidney Powell understood. She could either just say, okay, I'll accept these. I don't have to lose my law license. At least she hasn't at this point. I don't have to lose my law license. And 6 years, this all goes away as if it never existed. Sure, left-wing radicals will write about it, so on, etc. But and I can get on with my life. This isn't going to cost me millions and millions and millions of dollars. All right, so I just want to get on with my life. Especially, she's not a spring chicken at this point, so I absolutely don't. So I don't blame her. So that's that. She'll get to move on. Yes, she'll get to testify truthfully, quote unquote. But again, that could be bad for Trump. That could be excellent for Trump. And from what I understand, it's probably better for Trump because she's just gonna testify truthfully, and she's gonna be able to testify, and her defense attorney are gonna be able to collaborate with other defense attorneys and get information. So all in all, I actually think this helps the other defendants in the case. They will be pushed around in the media, but that's that. Let me just share this real quick because We talked about Joe Biden's speech. I know I'm going through a lot here, but we talked about Joe Biden's speech. Now, I want you, we address what Joe Biden didn't address, and that is the Chinese threat. There is a real Chinese threat. China is on the march. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, I played this on Officer Tatum's show. I want you to hear it. She is doing some great things. Governor Ron DeSantis did the same thing in Florida. It's one of the reasons why I like him. He did the same thing in Florida, where he literally he forbade Chinese companies from buying farmland here in the state of Florida. We're kicking them out of the state of Florida. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is doing that. Listen to what she's doing now. Back in the day, I would not have agreed with this, but my eyes have been open, just like so many of you have. And so she's kicking this Chinese-owned company out of the United States of America, and kudos to her for doing so. Here's Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
I was proud to sign Act 636, sponsored by Senator Johnson and Representative Vaught, banning foreign parties from 9 enemy countries from owning agricultural land in Arkansas. And today, we are acting on that law. I'm announcing that Syngenta, a Chinese state-owned agrochemical company, must give up its land holdings in Arkansas. Syngenta owns 160 acres in northeast Arkansas, which it uses primarily for seed research. The company that owns Syngenta, Chem China, is also on the Department of Defense's list of Chinese military companies posing a clear threat to our state. Seeds are technology. Chinese state-owned corporations filter that technology back to their homeland, stealing American research and telling our enemies how to target American farms. That is a clear threat to our national security and to our great farmers, especially since the Chinese government enacted a law in 2017 requiring Chinese citizens abroad to collaborate with their country's security officials on intelligence work with no questions asked. This isn't about where you're from. We welcome Chinese Americans, Russian Americans, and anyone else who's given up foreign oppression for American freedom. This is about where your loyalties lie. We simply cannot trust those who pledge allegiance to a hostile foreign power. That's why I signed Act 525, sponsored by Representative McKenzie and Senator Boyd, to ban Chinese and Russian-made drones. And it's why I signed Act 758, sponsored by Representative McAlinden and Senator Stubblefield, banning public contracts with the CCP. We will make sure that every company operating in Arkansas is a friend to Arkansas and good to hardworking Arkansans. Secretary Ward has already notified Syngenta about this decision. If they refuse to sell, our Attorney General can move forward with legal proceedings and force them to get out of our state. Arkansas will always protect our farmers and our national security interest. I want to thank our legislature for passing this common sense measure, and I want to thank the Department of Agriculture for working so hard on this issue.
And the onus is on the red states to make sure that we're securing our states as much as possible, because obviously Joe Biden has no intention to. The world knows that he's a joke. The world knows that he's a joke. All right. Our borders are wide open. You can talk about Ukraine and Russia all you want. You can even talk about Israel and Hamas. But as long as our borders are wide open, any American with common sense realizes there's a severe threat that another attack will be happening right here on our homeland. And that's on top of what we're already seeing and experiencing with the filth and the crime coming along with illegal aliens that are being shipped all across the country, and many that are basically living as homeless people at this point, because the borders are wide open and they've been essentially invited to come through the Biden administration. It's only a matter of time, but we already see the fentanyl deaths. I mean, you're talking about 100,000 Americans that are dying per year on average as a result of the fentanyl that is coming across our borders. How much more, I guarantee you how much rape and molestation, how many more crimes that are not being reported, sadly, by illegal aliens. It's just insane. Now, this is really scary. This is really scary. I want you to watch this video. I hope you subscribe to the podcast. where the Carl Jackson Show is where you can go to get the podcast. And by the way, if I have not said it, mypillow.com, please, guys, Christmas is coming up soon. In order to keep this podcast thriving, we need your help. The way that you can help us, you can actually go on YouTube, subscribe to our page, review, make sure that more people see us. All right. Same with Rumble. On YouTube, there's a special thanks there for those of you that would like to donate to help us. We'd like to get to a point where we're doing this full time. We're not there yet. We are working to get there. You've been working on, as we speak, trying to get better equipment to make this just a better all around show for you. But I'm looking forward to a day where this is a full-time deal. You guys can help us out in that way by supporting our sponsors, by sharing this podcast, or by donating through a super thanks. But please support Mike Lindell at MyPillow. Not only does it help American jobs and American manufacturing and you, because you get to get a good night's rest if you buy a MyPillow 2.0. You buy a mattress topper, Giza Dream Sheets, Giza Dream Sheets. All of these things are on special. All you have to do is click on the radio podcast square at the top of the page and enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or give them a call, 800-858-0263, 800-858-0263. All right, without any further ado, I want you to watch this video. Is scary. Guys, this has happened. Listen to me. We just found this out. This was just declassified the other day. This has happened nearly 200 times since Joe Biden has been inaugurated as president. Here it is. Pentagon declassifies nearly 200 intercepts between U.S. and Chinese warplanes. So watch this one on video. What you're going to see is this Chinese warplane in the distance. Watch how close it comes to the American warplane while Joe Biden is in office. This is what's happening. Let's roll a gate. Look at that Chinese warplane circling around. High altitude fighter jets or military planes. I'm not sure if the American one is a fighter jet. Look how close it comes. Just kind of taunting us. Wow. 180 times. 180 times. Look at this one. Indo-Pacific region. And they're just looking. Mad dogging. Unbelievable. We're just hearing about this stuff. All right, just real quick, I wanted to touch on this Trump gag order. I spoke about it yesterday. This is really, it goes beyond unfair. So let me just go through the details of this really quickly and we'll close out. Free speech, as I explained yesterday, it belongs to the Democrat Party. There is no free speech for Republicans or conservatives, Trump supporters anymore. It just doesn't exist in the United States of America. I'm sorry. I'm sad to say it. It's dead. We have the opportunity to resurrect those rights in 2024, or at least hold on to those rights in our states. So perhaps I shouldn't say that. In states, in states, we can still have those rights. In many of the red states, we do. Sadly, when it comes to the federal government, with Democrats being in charge, we simply don't. First, let me just share this with you. I've already shared what happened with Sidney Powell. This was the insurrection, the pro-Hamas group, Jewish Voices for Peace, that stormed the Capitol. No arrests as far as, actually, there were several hundred. I take that back. There were several hundred arrests made. I guarantee you these people will be able to bail out of jail. They won't be sitting in jail, a pre-trial detention, until their court date. And I guarantee you none of them will get sentenced to 22 years. And the reason being is because they're Democrats. And the reason being is that they're anti-Israel, they're anti-Zionist, all right, and they're pro-Hamas. It's as simple as that. So again, the group is called Jewish Voices for Peace. That's the group that led the insurrection in the Capitol the other day. And there was a Democrat caller. They called in to Officer Tatum's show last night. He didn't even hear about it. but he was calling to talk to me about, about the law and how Trump should be treated like everyone else under the law. Yet he didn't hear about the insurrection that was taking place, or that had taken place at the Capitol with these Jewish Voices for Peace. Even Jerry Nadler, a Democrat, said this, and I quote, "Their website says they are proud to be a part of the global Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which by its founders' admission and tenets seek to end Israel as a Jewish and democratic state." All right, and yet the U.S. Capitol Police began arresting protesters when they were told that they had to leave because they were not allowed to protest there. They didn't comply with the police orders. "We warned the protesters," the police said, "to stop demonstrating, and when they did not comply, we began arresting them. Arrests in the Cannon Rotunda and the rolling road closures are ongoing. Amongst these arrests, 3 people have been arrested and charged with assault on a police officer during processing." I wonder if they'll get 22 years. I doubt it. In the past, the group's protesters have held signs that said, quote, "Blaming Hamas for firing rockets is like blaming a woman for punching her rapist. What morons," close quote. Conservative radio host Jason Rantz said on X, "The only connection to Judaism members from Jewish Voice for Peace have is their parents." He went on to say they're not practicing Jews are culturally Jewish. They just use the identity that doesn't mean anything to them to attack Israel and earn progressive street cred with people who hate them, he went on to say. And that's true. Then you have this. The Trump supporter Douglas Mackey, you guys heard about him. Yeah, he got sentenced to 7 years for creating a meme. For creating memes. What did his memes say? Mackey was accused of a scheme to deprive individuals for their constitutional right to vote, hat tip to the Daily Wire, after a Twitter account he ran under the handle Ricky Vaughn posted memes in the lead up to the 2017 presidential election. One image showed a black woman standing in front of an African Americans for Hillary sign, quote unquote, and the sign read, "Avoid the line, vote from home, text Hillary to 5959925. Here's what the lawyer for the DOJ had to say about this. Voting is the right that secures all other rights we hold dear, he says. They were committing fraud, one that was aimed at one of our most sacred rights in our democracy. And Mackey was charged just a week after Biden took office. Now, keep in mind, this was leading up to the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton. So this guy created memes. No big deal for 4 years. And then when Biden got in office, they decided to take this guy to task. And now he's going to be spending 7 months behind bars as a result of it. What's crazy is Mackey was prosecuted, but conservatives have pointed out to a video that was made by comedian Christina Wong that urged Trump supporters to vote by text or on Wednesday, the day after the 2016 election. But listen, free speech doesn't exist for us. This is what we're fighting to get back, at least on the federal level. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And now you have the Trump gag order, whom Jonathan Turley, a professor and attorney at George Washington University, talked about how it is it's unfair. The gag order for Trump is unfair because, quite frankly, it is a different case. First off, this is unprecedented, and every American, he says, should be concerned with the with free speech values. If you are concerned about free speech values, you should be concerned about this case. You have Judge Tanya Chutkan, who described. Let me just read part of it here. It says, the imposition of a gag order on former President Trump was overwhelmingly applauded by pundits and press alike. Journalists described the order from U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan as narrow and limited. Most of them lionized Chutkan as an unflinching and no-nonsense judge who would not tolerate Trump's penchant for personal attacks and reckless rhetoric. So he says this should concern everyone. You might not like hearing Trump's jabs against the judge as actually the special counsel Jack Smith as deranged, or the judge being biased. But Smith has pushed aggressively for a gag order, Turley writes, even though one of the major issues in Trump's campaign is whether the Biden administration has weaponized the criminal justice system against him and other Republicans. And obviously, that's what's going on with this case. I mean, this is absolutely insane. He said this week Chutkan issued a partial gag order and stressed that she would not allow Trump to conduct, quote, a smear campaign, close quote, in which he seeks to, quote, vilify and implicitly encourage violence against public servants who are simply doing their jobs, close quote. She stressed that, quote, no other criminal defendant would be allowed to do so, and I'm not going to allow it in this case. She said. Now, that's where most people will say, well, listen, he's not above the law. But Jonathan Turley writes that these orders come at great cost because they limit both parties, the prosecution and the defense, from raising objections to alleged abuses by the government themselves. And that's exactly what's happening. The First Amendment was written in the aftermath of such abuses, he writes, including the infamous prosecution of publisher John Peter Zenger 290 years ago in 1733. Polls show that the majority of Americans believe that Trump's prosecutions are politically motivated and that this will be the single most discussed issue of the campaign, yet Trump won't be able to talk about it. Chutkan either doesn't care or she refuses to recognize that both the case and this defendant are significantly different. I'm sorry. This is her order bars Trump from making statements against Smith, his staff, and potential witness. But this is a case like we've never seen. Remember, this is unprecedented, what we're going through. So to pretend like this is a typical case is insane. So she barred statements targeting court staffs or jurors. Now, that's fine. That's fine. I don't think Trump should talk about court staff or jurors. I do believe that that would be wrong. But she has also imposed what Turley writes as a vaguely worded court order that could turn campaign speeches into criminal contempt. And we all know that Jack Smith is a political hack. He went after Robert McDonnell, the former governor of Virginia. Back in the day, I thought Robert McDonnell would rise to the presidency one day, and you had Jack Smith that took him out. And then later, I mean, all of the charges were not only dropped, but in a unanimous 8-0 decision by the Supreme Court, they were absolutely reversed. The closest case that you have to what Donald Trump is enduring right now is the corruption trial of Representative Harold Ford Sr., the Democrat from Tennessee, and the district court barred him from making any, quote, extrajudicial statement that a reasonable person would expect to be disseminated by means of public communication, close quote. That included criticism of the motives of the government or basis, merits, or evidence of the prosecution at the time. But the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit rejected the gag order as, quote, overbroad. This was the case against Harold Ford Sr., overbroad, and stressed that any such limits on free speech should be treated as, quote, presumptively void and may be upheld only on the basis of a clear showing that an exercise of First Amendment rights will interfere with the rights of the parties to a fair trial, close quote. All right. So her order will only silence the voice of the man who many feel is the victim of politically motivated prosecutions. The prosecution can go out and say whatever they want against Trump. The media could say whatever they want against Trump, but he's the one that has to be silent, regardless of how you feel about the man. This is absolutely wrong. This is chaotic. Not to mention Chutkan herself hasn't shown restraint when it comes to Trump. In 2022, in a sentencing for a J6 protester, Chutkan said that the rioters, quote, were there in fealty and loyalty to one man, not to the Constitution. She also added that, quote, it's a blind loyalty to one person who, by the way, remains free to this day, close quote. Almost as if she was looking forward to and salivating, to prosecute Donald Trump. But he can't go out and say this chick is biased? Come on. That's insane, guys. It's absolutely insane. There is no free speech. We won't have it back until we win. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. We have covered a lot today. We've covered what Biden didn't say in his speech. We've covered the Chinese aggression against the United States of America. I did mention how Americans literally were attacked in Iraq missiles were launched their way. Also, did I share this? Israeli military has the green light to launch a ground invasion of Gaza as U.S. weapons arrive. And now that they have the military backing, I guess, of the U.S. with the ships in the Mediterranean, that ensures quite possibly that other nation states like Iran won't get directly involved. So we'll see what happens. I pray and hope that Israel wipes Hamas off the face of the earth. I really do. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.